All right, guys. It has been a minute since I have done a podcast from here. I'm excited for it. All right, I'm going to give it about 30 seconds to let some people tune in. And today, guys, we're talking about where you were 5 years ago. And we're talking about this for one simple reason. Honestly, it's just very easy to get caught up in feeling like you're not making enough progress. Like, I know I've gotten stuck in that feeling running a business so many times where I'm seeing people around me doing really well, whatever it might be. And I'm thinking like, man, I'm not going fast enough. I'm not doing enough. I got to push harder. I got to do more. Like having that kind of internal struggle with yourself that you don't feel like you're doing enough. And I know I feel that. I know that there are a lot of other people that feel that. Yes, I can see the comments, but I'm going to get into them after we're done the live stream, after we're done the podcast. But yeah, I know I feel that. I know a lot of other people out there feel that. So we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about that internal struggle, feeling like you're not doing enough, feeling like you're not moving fast enough. We're going to get into the episode here in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I am your host, Kenny Dusseault, and it is good to be back. Like, we did an episode yesterday, but it's been a little while, so I'm very happy we're back on. We're going to keep this going steady now, back to 5 a week. Schedule's kind of picked up a little bit, but we're going to make some time for it, even if we have to shift the times around a little bit. The 5 a week are back. So all of you who tune in, I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bearing with me during a little bit of time away. But let's get into it. Today's episode is called Where Were You 5 Years Ago? And the reason that we're talking about this, the reason that I'm asking that question is because a few weeks ago, I was coming back from the UFC Performance Institute. Now, quick backstory there. I helped Chris Curtis out for his fight camp for UFC 297. Go back and watch that fight. I thought it was sick. I thought he did super well. It was, I believe, the most punch output he's had in a UFC fight in his career. So very happy with the results that we got within that time. But I was down in Vegas about 2 weeks out from the fight and met up with Chris and got introduced to the strength and conditioning staff at the PI. And at the time, I was in Vegas for a different event, but got to go in and shadow for a couple of days at the PI, which was super fun, amazing experience. And the head coach there, Gav Pratt, Gav, shout out to you if you ever see this, told me, hey, anytime you're back in Vegas, let me know, and you can come through and spend the day or something again. And I laughed and I said, I hope that invite's open because I'm not going to wait until I happen to be back in Vegas. I'm coming back to Vegas for that. And that's just a little bit of a side story because, again, investing in yourself is a massively important piece of being successful at anything. And as a strength coach for combat athletes, I know that the UFC PI is doing things that people out there in the industry aren't doing. So if I have the opportunity to go there and learn from those people, quite honestly, I don't care what it costs. I'm going to make it work. And so a couple weeks back, I was back at the UFC PI for that open invitation from their strength and conditioning staff. I appreciate you guys all again. And when I was on the way back, I saw a post on Instagram and it said, 5 years ago, you dreamt about where you are today. And I remember just laughing and thinking, man, 5 years ago, I don't even know if I could have dreamt of where I'm at today. Like, because I'm sitting in the Las Vegas airport on my way back from spending 2 days around some of the best athletes in the world on a trip to Las Vegas that I paid for myself, which 5 years ago would have been unheard of, staying at a nice hotel, driving around in a nice rental car. Like, I would have never been dreaming that I'd be in Vegas on a trip by myself to go spend 2 days at a $12 million gym to watch and learn. Like, never. But still, that quote spoke to me. 5 years ago, you dreamt about where you are today. And so that's what I want to talk to you guys about because it made me realize how easy it is to forget how much progress we've made. How easy it is to be living in the day-to-day and be thinking, oh man, I'm not far enough. Oh, I'm not doing enough. Like, I know for myself, one of those thoughts that comes up, and it sounds silly even as I say it, but one of those thoughts that comes up is, man, I'm not working with enough UFC athletes because that's a goal of mine. I want to work with a lot of UFC athletes. I want to travel to be with those athletes to help them through camps. And, I'm not doing enough of that. And then when I actually sit and think about it, I've worked with multiple UFC athletes already. And that's pretty fucking cool. There are a lot of coaches that start into this kind of industry and never reach that level. So who am I to sit here and say, oh, I haven't reached that level fast enough, or I haven't, climbed higher than that level yet. But especially because when I think back to where I was 5 years ago, like I said, I couldn't even dream of where I'm at now. 5 years ago, I was working a job at a gym. I was burnt out because the job that I had at that gym, basically the expectation over time became, if you're awake, you're at work. So we were making, to put it nicely, not very good money. And technically, quote unquote, we were only working 40 hours a week because we were on salary. But as an example, one of my days in that 40-hour work week was I had a client at 6 o'clock in the morning. I had a client at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had a client at 10:30 in the morning. I had a client at noon. I had a client at 2. I had a client at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. Right? So technically it's, however many coaching hours, but it's spread out over a 16-hour day. And most of my days kind of looked like that. So I was making terrible money to work all the time, basically felt underappreciated, felt burnt out. Most nights I was literally getting home, sitting on my couch going, I'll just sit here for a minute before I go to bed, and then waking up to my alarm the next day because I was so fucking exhausted I couldn't even make it to my bed. On top of that, I was feeling like there was no possible way I could make it as running my own business because I just didn't have the confidence for that. I was working a job and I was so dependent on a job that was paying me so poorly to do so much that I was like, man, would I be able to do it myself? It's going to be so much harder. There's going to be so much more that goes into it. I don't think I'm able to do that. On top of that as well, that kind of schedule and that kind of, life really led to some struggles mentally. I was basically living for the weekend where I could go out and get blackout drunk. There was a terminology that went around that gym where what would even be the word? I don't know. Basically, everybody would talk about golf day Kenny because at one of the company golf days, I got so fucking hammered while I was on the boss's team, by the way, not a super smart move, but I got so fucking hammered that I blacked out. And quite honestly, I don't even know what I did, but the next day I got called into my boss's office to have a very firm talking to about how that was not acceptable behavior for people who worked at our company, which is completely fair. But that's the state I was in. The state I was in was I was just living for the time that I could get away from this job that was so hard to deal with, so I could go escape the insecurities I was feeling, escape the burnout I was feeling, escape all the kind of shit that I was feeling by going to get blackout drunk all the time. And that's just not a good life. And that's where I was 5 years ago. Now, 5 years later, I'm running a 6-figure company. I have a team of 4 that I lead. And I'm building a large name on social media. Slowly but surely it's picking up. We just crossed 40,000 followers on Instagram this morning, which is really fucking cool. I'm working with athletes around the world in, I believe, up to 17 different countries, maybe 18 different countries at this point. I've worked with multiple UFC fighters, like I said. I've been so fully sober for 2 years, haven't had a single drop of alcohol in 2 years. And like I said as well, I've got connections in with the best facility in the world for what I do, where I can go down, spend days there, learn from them, develop through them, and bring that to the athletes that I work with worldwide. So that's a massive change for really and truly not that long of a period of time. And the reason that that's so important, and the reason I want to reinforce that with you guys today, is because I see so many athletes that, they sit here and they're about to have their amateur debut and they say, yeah, I want to go pro in 2 years. Why the fucking rush? Why do you need to do it in 2 years? Why are you so focused on, I need that outcome today? Because if you're super far from that outcome, like 5 years ago, if the only thing I'd been focused on was, I need to be working with UFC athletes and making way more money and doing this and doing that, I would have been fucking miserable because I would have had no idea how that path was going to happen. So the same thing, if you're early in your career, you've had 1 or 2 fights, maybe you haven't started yet, whatever it might be, and your only focus is, I need to be a UFC champion. I need to be a UFC champion. I need the UFC belt. I need to get there as fast as possible. You're going to be fucking miserable because you're so far from that goal that you're going to have no idea how to get there. But the way that I was able to go from, again, drunken mess on the weekends, burned out all the time, living a life that I honestly fucking hated. I loved that I was in the industry that I was in because I've wanted to do this forever, but I hated the job that I was in, if that makes sense. But the way that I was able to make that change, the way that I was able to go from, so far down, feeling like in that position to where I'm at today, and now I know even so much further, which is going to come, is by focusing on bettering myself. By focusing on bettering myself. And when I say that, I don't just mean, focusing on improving as a coach. That's one element of it, 100%. But I started tackling those insecurities. I started asking myself, when the weekend comes around, why do I want to go out and get fucking hammered all the time? And I realized the reason I wanted to go out and get fucking hammered all the time is because I was unhappy. And it was easier to go get hammered and forget about that than it was to sit in that unhappiness, figure out what's causing it, and fucking fix it. So over that time, I started focusing on actually fixing what was wrong with me instead of escaping it by going out and getting drunk. Over that time, I started diving into personal development. I started diving into learning about the human mind, learning about why I struggled with the things I struggled with, and actually putting into action things I could do to fix the problems. That was the anxieties, that was the insecurities, that was, again, the alcohol. That was so many different areas that I was struggling that I realized I was like, if I keep just doing what I'm doing, life is going to suck forever. But if I fix the problems and I actually just work on me, better things are going to come on the other side of that. Now, at the time, I wasn't thinking 6-figure business, working with the UFC Performance Institute, working with athletes in 18 countries, building a name on social media. I was thinking not waking up feeling like shit every day. And then one step beyond that, and then one step beyond that. And then the results that I started getting were because I wasn't looking at the outcome. I wasn't looking at trying to get to where I am 5 years later as fast as possible. I was just looking at getting better. The other thing that I did was I started investing in mentors. Brian, Mark, and Cole Dusseault, they're my business mentors, but they've been so much more than that. And so I want to shout them out every chance I get. And the reason is because not only were they helping as far as, teaching me how to run a business, teaching me how to speak better on camera, teaching me, those basic fundamental skills. The other thing they really helped me with was believing in myself. And that sounds like a corny thing, but I know a lot of the people listening right now and a lot of the people listening back to this on the replay might speak like they believe in themselves. They might say all the right words, but you don't actually believe it when you look at yourself in the mirror. You might say, I'm going to make the UFC, but when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you actually see that in your future? When you look at yourself in the mirror, do you actually see putting on those UFC gloves one day? Or are you just saying the words because it feels good when people pat you on the back because you have big goals? If you don't actually see it in your future, you're going to keep finding ways to sabotage it. But if you actually want to see that in your future, you need to work on improving yourself. And having people in your life, having mentors, having coaches is one of the best ways to do it, because chances are they've been through similar things to what you're going through. And if they've been through similar things to what you're going through, then you're going to be able to learn from them. You're going to be able to take from their mistakes, apply them to yourself, and make those changes and fix those problems that you have faster. Now, the final thing that I really want to reinforce with you guys as well is that I created a vision. Over the last 5 years, I've started actually sitting down and writing out, what do I want life to look like? And I wrote out things like, I want to run a 6-figure business. I want to work with athletes all over the world. I want to work with professional athletes. I want to network with top-level coaches. And by doing that, and by actually writing it out, I started understanding what my drive was every day. I started working harder, not because I felt like I had to. I started working harder because I realized that if I want all these things that I was finally willing to say that I wanted, what I was doing wasn't enough. What I was doing wasn't enough, and I needed to make a change that was actually going to allow me to reach that level. So my challenge for you coming out of this is I want you to look at where you were 5 years ago. I want you to look at where you were 5 years ago, and I want you to look at the changes, the positive changes that you've made to your life. And if you are in a place that is significantly further ahead than you were 5 years ago, then you're on the right path. But now you've got to ask yourself, where do you want to be 5 years from now? And if you want to be somewhere great 5 years from now, have that vision written out. Understand exactly what you want 5 years from now to look like. And when you have that clear in your mind and you understand what you want 5 years from now to look like, then you can take steps every day to move one step closer to that. And you've got a clear motivation as to what you're actually trying to move closer to. You have a clear motivation as to why you want to get there. So guys, that's it. That's all. I hope you got some good out of that. I hope you learned something. If you did, I would love to hear it. Go ahead and shoot me a message across any of my social media platforms. Let me know what you took away. As always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next episode.